little bit of your time to go over consulting and consulting recruiting in particular. Um, it is certainly something that's pretty hands-on in the fall. And so I want to make sure you all know what's coming up and make sure you know the resources you have available to you. And first of all, let's introduce the team. So hopefully these faces are starting to look familiar to you. Emily Anderson's our director, and she is an Owen alum. She's been with the team over 20 years and specifically works with finance folks, but you can always reach out to any of us. I'm Courtney. I've been here 8 years and work with consulting. Sandy Kinnett has been here over 16 years, I think. And she does healthcare, HOP operations, and real estate. And Kathleen has been with us 2 or 3 years. She was a coach in another capacity at a different organization in Vanderbilt prior, and she does marketing and technology. As a part of the CMC team, we have coaches, and then we also have an employer relations team. So they are interacting with our employer partners who are recruiters, but then also in many instances, alum. So Heather's our director, and she has been with Owen for over 14 years, I think. And Emma joined us a while back, and I'll let her say a brief intro because she's on the call.
Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you. Yes, I have been with Owen for 2 years now and was at Vanderbilt prior to that. And I work with consulting employer partners. So Courtney and I work very closely together. It's great to meet you all.
Very closely is putting it lightly, but yes, we do work very closely together. And as I mentioned before, y'all might have heard me, we do have a current student on the call. Her name is Monica. I'm going to get to her in a minute, and you're going to have the opportunity to not only hear from me, but hear from students who actually experienced this whole process. So we will get to that. But before we get to the juicy bits, I wanted to go over some hopefully helpful information, in particular, the career overview of consulting, the timelines, the time commitment that is coordinated with those timelines, and then we'll do a panel and I can offer some resources and next steps. So consulting, to put it quite simply, which is a very general way to put it, is problem solving. You are coming into businesses and hopefully problem solving for something that they're unable to look at from a different perspective internally or don't have time to look at internally. And as a result, they're looking for folks who are strategic and creative thinkers. You thrive in ambiguity, you're adaptable and flexible. Things change quickly when you're in this role, and you want to be able to move accordingly. And you want to be collaborative and a clear communicator. So this is a team-driven sport. You're going to come in with a team of consultants, 2 to 15, depending on the size of the problem. And not only communicate with those team members, but also the clients. So the other company that you're working for. A lot of these solutions come from data. So you want to be familiar with data and analytics, use what data they have collected or have internal to them to help solve a problem. And this is particularly helpful. You all are coming from various backgrounds, which is fantastic because within consulting, they want to hire from different verticals and different areas. However, they are looking for someone who has a minimum of 3 years of experience, usually around to 5, 7 years, up to 10 years of experience. I just say this as a general rule. Rules are meant to be broken, but consulting is it's a highly paid, highly sought after career. And because of that, they can demand certain experience, years of experience in particular. So we will help you translate that experience into what they will want. But it really is, we have some younger candidates, some folks that have been in industry for 15 years, and sometimes it's just hard. You want to hit that 3 to 5, 3 to 7 years. And then a great thing, especially for MBB, is to have high marks, whether that is your GPA, a GMAT, or a scholarship of note. It is something that people who are reviewing documents can quantify easily. And so it becomes a metric that they utilize. You are not going to be not included in a process because you don't have those metrics. I just mentioned that it's something that you can tout and make sure that you have on your document.
Courtney, before you move forward, sorry,
Yeah.
you had one question. Is that 3 to 5 years of consulting specific experience, or is that general work experience?
That's a great question. It's not consulting specific experience. They know you're coming to your MBA to make a career transition, most likely. And we will help you develop those transferable skills or identify the transferable skills that you have, and note those on your resume. So many firms in particular are looking for experience that is outside of I was a consultant prior, because again, they're looking for those creative thinkers who are coming in with various experience.
There are 2 more questions. Courtney, do you want to answer these now, or do you
Sure.
want? Okay. Let me ask the first, is the GMAT necessary for MBB?
Nothing is a rule at this point. I think COVID put everything on its head. However, when I look statistically at who has success with MBB, most folks have GMATs. I would say to subsidize not having a GMAT, GPAs are over a 3.5 are looked at very positively. Additionally, certain scholarships and notable scholarships are also considered to go towards your candidacy.
Thank you. And second question, have you seen success with students with 10+ years of experience landing in consulting roles?
So it depends. Get used to this answer. I apologize in advance. And I say that because we have a lot of veterans who, for example, serve 4, 6, 8, or maybe 10 years. And there's certainly a transition to be made after 10 years into consulting. I think that's really well viewed. However, folks who come from industry for 11, 12, 13 years, sometimes it's hard to come in at that associate level just because they think they're misaligned with levels. And so it's certainly possible the firm rather, gets concerned that you're not interested in the MBA level hire. And so they tend to look towards 5 years of experience. However, consulting is very networking. And so in addition to just putting a document or a couple documents in front of a recruiter, you will have the fall to engage with folks. And that will help layer your candidacy and perhaps pull you in despite what a document looks like. Okay, I'm going to keep going and maybe save some of these questions for Monica, if that's okay. Okay.
Right.
And me, I'm here the whole hour, but yeah. Okay, so I wanted to pull some stats because we live and breathe by those, or you will starting in a couple months. Consulting over COVID did really well, as you might know. And over the past couple of years, it's been harder. This is a look at what the trends look like over the past 5 years, in particular, what we have for this summer, that hopefully will translate into full time. So there's been a dip. It's still completely a pipeline for us. I just want to be forthcoming with where things land right now. We are very lucky at Owen. We have such strong relationships with a core group of maybe even 10 firms. And so there are adverse effects that happen everywhere, but because of those relationships, we just have really strong pipelines, which is exciting. So then when we look overall, we're still really high on where folks are going over the past 5 years. Finance and consulting are big hitters in Owen's world. And again, I think it's very relationship driven. Not only are y'all fantastic candidates, but you're culturally who folks want to work with, which is fantastic. It's also why we love working with you as a CMC. And I want to point out, so there are certainly consulting firms, and you can go in as a generalist, you can go in within a finance vertical. There's also internal strategy. And I don't want to ignore the fact that the prep that you're going to do in the fall is applicable to more than just consulting firms. And in fact, the prep you do could help you in marketing interviews and corporate finance interviews, healthcare interviews. So there's internal strategy, and then there are industry specific interviews that happen, and many of those are case-based. And so much of the prep that you will do, which we'll go over what the details of that looks like, but that prep will really help you in many, many interview processes. So I just want to call out a Genuine Parts company. It's an alum who has established that relationship and built a strategy team, for example. So he knows what a consulting interview looks like, and he comes in and says, I know exactly the type of candidate Owen has. I'm going to run a case with them and then also pull them in for strategy. Humana, huge healthcare company, they will do sort of a case-based business conversation as part of their interview process. So just some examples of folks who follow along with the case-based interviews that happen with consulting firms. And also you will do work that you would do at a consulting firm at an American Airlines LDP, for example. Okay. And the timeline. So I'm going to have Monica sort of talk to this a little bit more, but I wanted to give a brief overview. I think it's really smart of you all to use the summer for exploration and getting your document ready. Document meaning resume. Exploration, we have tools and resources you all can use on 1220. There's also the World Wide Web, so lots of YouTube videos of what does a case look like? What is a career in marketing? What is a career in healthcare? But as you explore careers, we have a complete folder for you all to look at for career exploration, for example. So utilize your summer to get geared up for the possibilities of what a post-MBA life could look like. And then once you jump in August and September, you can further define those resumes. You will be able to interact with your peer coach. A peer coach is a second year who has been interviewed and pulled in to be a helpful resource in addition to a CMC coach. So hopefully we'll pair you with someone who has similar interests or a similar background to you, and you can utilize them to look at resumes, cover letters, or just say, oh my goodness, what does a coffee chat look like? Or what did your process look like? Because we know we want to offer as many resources as possible. So those will start early. And then recruiting events start in September. Events look like lots of different things. I'd say classic are info sessions where companies engage with Emma's team in particular and say, hey, we want to come and meet with students. We'll do a 45-minute presentation and then maybe 15 minutes of networking afterwards. It's a way for them to start tracking who's engaged with us, who's interested. National career fairs start up in particular. National Black is in September, and it's a great opportunity for students to visit in person and go to a career fair and interact with employers who attend. Then we have early interviews with HOP and IB later in the fall, and application drops start happening November, December, typically dependent on your candidacy. There might be some earlier opportunities as well. Interviews are usually happening in January into February, and it can vary depending on firm, but consulting interviews have gotten earlier and earlier, I've noticed. So your winter break would probably be utilized to prep according to what news you hear. So you would probably hear second or third week of December if you have some interviews coming up in January. And that's where you can do particular prep for those. So that's the overall timeline. And I want to point out there's this case and technical preparation that is also overlaid with the fall. So in coordination with the consulting strategy and consulting club, you will be given tools to learn how to case. And in particular, we have 3 folks who are on the board of the consulting club who are tasked with leadership and development. And they will host 5 to 7 Sunday night sessions that are 2 to 3 hours, deep dive into casing. And then in addition to that, the CMC employs some students to do one-on-one casing with you. that will pick up in October and November, that you'll start casing with second years. But I just want to point out how many resources you have. In addition to who you have at Owen, I've also partnered traditionally with a couple outside experts who you'll be acquainted with through 1220. Hopefully you're signing up. Tonight it is an example. We have Management Consulted hosting a virtual session. It's like a casing 101 overview. So sort of let's look into what casing might look like. And they'll host that one, and then a casing 102 in a couple weeks. So lots of things. I know it's a lot to throw at you. We will continue to remind you what everything looks like, but and this is sort of an overwhelming overview of what a fall could look like for a student. So we track everything in 1220 because 1220 becomes a huge source of knowledge for the CMC. This is an example of a 2024 grad and his internship recruiting process. He was doing consulting and healthcare in tandem, and so attended sessions that were related to both. In particular, he attended 20 info sessions, 7 CMC workshops, which would be something like this, 6 exploration events. So it could be experts that come in and talk about something, or it could be alum that come in and have a lunch and learn to talk about what their time at Owen looked like or what their time post Owen has looked like. And then this is the case stuff I was talking about. So 40 plus cases and practice cases that you'll do with second years, most likely, some first years also paired together. And then he did 11 coaching appointments, so one-on-ones with myself, going over resume review at first, cover letters, and then also doing mock interviews once he had interviews on the table to talk about, okay, let's go over our behavioral interviews in particular. So I have my tell me about yourself and tell me about a time when questions answered, and those go in tandem with the case prep. Da, da, da. Okay, so y'all, I want you to see these happy faces now because hopefully they'll be very familiar to you starting late August. If you haven't met everyone already. So Andrew is the incoming president of the consulting club, and Robert, Monica, and Simran are your L&D leads, the case folks that I mentioned. I'll have Monica introduce herself here in a minute. And then Helen, Kaylin, and Megan are also members of the board who have different functions for our symposium, for looking after finances, for helping you organize your educational resources. So Monica, can you do a brief overview and then have some questions to ask you, and then we'll open it up for everyone.
I'm happy to. I also noticed Kaylin's name on the call as well.
Yay! Oh, Kaylin, hi. Thank you. I can't see everyone.
As a bit of background for myself, so I'm originally from Boston. I'm a rising second year. I kind of have, there's a lot of paths you can take going into consulting. I have a very, kind of a lot, like parallel path. I was in consulting before at a much smaller firm. I knew I wanted to do something at a larger firm where I had more access to broader industries and really larger size projects. So that was my goal coming into school. I knew that. So I've really tailored my preparation in the fall towards that. And I'm happy to report that I'll be interning at BCG this summer. I'm starting next Monday. So enjoying my last week of, sun and relaxation before that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Monica. And Kaylin, I can't see that you're on. I'm sorry, but can you do an intro as well?
No problem. Yeah, I started my internship at Analysis Group, which is an economic consulting firm. So it's slightly different than your typical management consulting that we typically talk about during OSCC panels. But we do similar work, but I think it's a little more quantitative for economic consulting, and we do slightly different things. But I started yesterday, so it's my second day of work. But I think many of you have probably met me from the recruiting and admissions team. I work with them over there. So excited to see a lot of familiar faces. And yeah, take all this in. I did the management consulted case prep 1 and 2. And I would recommend that as well, because I do think it really is a good kicking off point for everyone this summer.
Love the plugs. Thank you. Thank you. So y'all had, I remember being engaged with you all last fall, but at different levels. So I'd love to hear, Monica, first, what did your fall look like? So in particular, what did the start look like? And then the progression through the fall before applying. So networking, prepping documents, engaging in info sessions and things like that.
Okay, yes. So when I got to school, like I said, I knew that I wanted to do consulting, so I really honed in on that. It started with, I would say, a conversation with my peer coach, who I met with maybe within the first 2 weeks of starting. We went over to Starbucks and started talking. He had just completed an internship in consulting at LEK, so we spoke about his experience and really how he got to there. So I had him as a resource, and I kind of leveraged that to have more coffee chats with second year students to understand, where they were coming from, understand what their preparation looked like, and ultimately like to get other connections at the firms that they interned with or people they could point me to later on in the fall. But really the first batch was really just second years and talking to them. Then on the weekends, you guys will know about OSCC, the Strategy and Consulting Club. They do Sunday sessions. So Sunday nights, I would carve out the time to go to those and make sure throughout the week I was doing the assigned case with one of my first year friends, going to the office hours with the L&D team if I needed that. And then on the side as well, meeting with Courtney, the CMC team, to make sure that I was really like honing in on my resume. I ran my cover letter by my peer coach. And then it sounds like a lot, and it is kind of a lot when you get in, but once you're in the groove of it, there's also information sessions throughout the week. So you'll want to be checking 1220 pretty much every day to see what firms are coming, when they're coming. You'll want to be on the list so that you can attend those in the evenings throughout the week as well. And you slowly build your network of people, resources at Owen. Your second years also contacts the firms that you can reach out to. So that was for me.
Thank you, Monica. And Kaylin, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I think it's important to just try to get everything you can get done before you hit the ground running in August. So for me, I made sure like my resume was up to snuff. It was in the format that consultants like it in, because that is a pretty big hurdle, even though it doesn't seem like it. Sometimes it can take time to get that done, and you would just rather be doing other things during your first couple of weeks of school rather than tweaking your resume. But like kind of Monica said, what we really do during the first couple of weeks is just keep an open mind, right? There's a lot of people here who want to do consulting, and there's a lot of other opportunities as well. And it's important to kind of go do everything, right? Go see everything. Leave no door unopened, because it really is important for your MBA program to really see a bunch of different things. And so I would say try not to get hyper focused on specific firms within consulting or specific practice areas, because I really think it's important for you to have a big, like, broad view of kind of what goes on in consulting, because you might actually find something that you didn't realize existed previously. So I think really going to those info sessions is very, very important. Even if you don't necessarily think that you want to do that, just hearing about other types of firms or other types of consulting is very important. But I would say, yeah, try to get your resume done. Don't worry too much about things like writing draft cover letters, because you'll are able to do that kind of like later on. And some firms don't care about cover letters, some firms do, and you won't really know until kind of you hit the ground running and do coffee chats with your second years. And so I would just say, really come in with an open mind and explore all the opportunities that consulting has to offer.
Kaylin, I will like double tap on that. I don't know if retweeting is a thing that we say anymore, but I think having parallel plans is really smart and important. The snapshot of the students' recruiting process in the fall that I shared a couple slides ago, he came in thinking consulting, and quickly said, wait a second, healthcare strategy is like actually where I want to land, or the work I want to do rather. And that is ultimately where he landed, and gets to stay in Nashville. He's doing strategy work for one of the largest healthcare companies. that everyone knows. He went through the prep, knew how to case, so was able to interview across the board. And I think ultimately used the prep and the networking that he did through consulting prep to land where he ultimately is. So Kaylin, yes, that's very smart to come in and just use the resources available to you.
Courtney, if I could just jump in, I wanted to answer a question that I think helps in talking about information sessions, coffee chats, all different types of recruiting events. So campus recruiting, mark your calendars, begins September 3rd. And that means that there will be employers on campus Monday through Thursday. So there are lots of other events going on at Owen on Fridays, but we do not typically have employers on campus on Fridays because of everything else that happens on campus. And those sessions take place. So the lunch hour at Owen is from 1:15 to 2:15. And so there will be lunch sessions that happen, as well as 2 different evening blocks. So 6 to 6:50 and then 7 to 7:50 are the 2 different time frames in the evening. And sometimes, I'm sure that Kayla and Monica can both speak to this. Sometimes it's like you're going to a session during lunch, and then you're going to a session from 6 to 7, and you're running over to another classroom from 7 to 8. And then sometimes there's a happy hour after. So your days can be long during recruiting. But we do our best to communicate via 1220, and then the employer relations team also sends out a weekly email that will on Fridays during recruiting season that details everyone that will be on campus the following week. And so those are usually the best ways to have a pulse on what's going on campus in terms of recruiting and employers on campus.
Thank you, Emma. So I have 2 more questions I want to ask. And the first being, I know this varies by firm, but Monica and/or Kaylin, can you talk to me about what networking looks like and what it means, especially in consulting recruiting?
Sure, I can jump in first, and then Caitlin, if you want to add perspective too. So for me, what it looked like was, like I mentioned, started with second years. And when you come in and you're networking with a second year, it's really like a casual conversation to understand their perspective, their experience, and really get a feel for, is this something that you want to do? How do you do it? And really learn from them. And then once you make good connections with your second years and through other resources like the CMC and these events that happen throughout the week, you'll start meeting people at the firms that you attend sessions for or that you meet second years who intern for. And that typically looks like an introduction, either at an event, via email. We'll go over in a Sunday session exactly what the norms are, so you don't need to get very stressed about that. But depending on the firm, you have a Zoom call, or some will come to school and you'll have a coffee chat where you're just meeting in a team room and talking to them. Typically, you'll want to prepare a list of questions that you have for them, whether that's about the practice area they're in, or just learning about the role of the company more generally, anything at the company that's important to you. And then typically after that, you'd follow up with them after a call, just say thank you always. And you can leverage anyone you meet at these firms to help connect you to more people at the firms to learn more if you have more questions. So that was my experience. Kaylin, if you had something similar or different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something I learned this year was there is no right or wrong way to do networking. There's some things that you absolutely should not do, but it depends, what works for you is going to be different than what works for someone else. And so for me, I didn't really like going out and talking to a million people. And I was very targeted. I really only networked with maybe 4 or 5 people in total, just because that's what I was comfortable with. And that's kind of the type of atmosphere and company that I wanted to work for. So you'll hear there's going forward, but there's some companies that are very network heavy, and then there are some that are not. And I think you will get the feel of what those companies and who those companies are during kind of the Sunday sessions and just talking to your peers and talking to the second years. But I would say if you feel like you're an introvert, don't worry. You can still network very effectively. It's just going to look different than someone who's perhaps an extrovert. So I would not panic, because networking is a very personalized thing, and you're just gonna have to figure out what works for yourself. But yeah, we start with the second years because those are kind of like the people who are closest to you, the people who just kind of did internships, and they're going to have a really good understanding of what, like, the point in time you're in and like how stressed you are and what you're going through. And they'll be able to kind of help you and move you forward with the networking process. So the very first thing you're going to do is talk to the second years. And then depending on the firm that you're interested in and that you feel like you fit with, then those second years will help introduce you to more people in the firm. So I think that if you feel very overwhelmed at this point, like talking to so many people, it's not like you're talking to a partner at a firm day one. You're not, right? You're talking to the second years at Owen. So don't panic. It's actually, I think, a fairly smooth process as long as you make the effort to make it a smooth process. And the second years are all very helpful, especially Monica. She's super helpful. So don't worry about reaching out to us the second years next year. It's what we did to our previous second year batch, and just kind of relax and enjoy the process.
And I'll say a big part of why consulting networking happens for many firms is because it's a client-facing role. It's a client services role. So it's a part of, okay, how do they build rapport with clients, with me? Would they be a fit? And so it's not all for naught. It can be exhausting in some instances, but it's also exciting because you get to learn about different firms, the intricacies of who they hire, why they hire, what processes are going to look like, what projects they're doing. Every firm is different. Kalen, as he was speaking, is at a very specific niche firm, and he really liked the work in particular and how they worked. BCG, where Monica's going, is different, has a different culture, different location. I mean, there are all these differences. And so you're able to sort of figure that out as you're going through the fall recruiting process.
I wanted to also plug, and I'm going to drop this in the chat after I say this as well, but many firms have some summer opportunities that are either summer programs or just programming, open programming that you are able to register for and join. I'm going to drop a link, and many of you have likely seen this already, but there is a document that we compile of pre-MBA programs. And please keep checking that because we continue to add programs as we become aware of them. I actually just got analysis groups summer programming today. So I will pass that along and make sure that is added in that document, but be sure to save this link.
And the last question I will prompt, and then I'll hand it over to the attendees, might most likely be linked to Monica. But Monica, could you say what is L&D and casing and everything they will be introduced to? I know we've sort of hit on it, but more specifically, the programming you all are pulling together. What will that mean for these folks?
Happy to. So the L&D team is the learning and development team. So it's the three of us on the top right, Robert, myself, and Simran. And ultimately, you will be seeing a lot of us. So excited to work really closely together. We'll have Sunday sessions, which will largely be leading. So that's about 2 to 3 hours on Sunday evenings, where we will walk you through basically everything you need to be successful in a case interview from, the moment you walk into the interview to the moment you leave. So we'll talk about how to answer case questions. What's the structure of a case? Really, what is a case in general? What are the different types of cases? Really walking from the basics into, by, mod 2 kind of advanced casing skills. So we do the Sunday sessions. In addition to that, we provide kind of many assignments or cases to be practicing throughout the weeks with your peers. We also hold office hours during the week. So if you're ever like, I'm completely lost or I need help, we're always there to support you. And in addition to that, we also have some other kind of programming planned on some, specifics throughout the first 2 mods. So we have, I think, an M&A primer talk as well as a another one on some business acumen skills that you can use within your case. We'll talk more about that when we get to that point. But in addition to all of that, we also provide just, 3 people to ask questions to, and really people who are on your team and want you to succeed and be there. So really here to help in any way possible. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out at any point to any of us.
Thank you. And I can see we have some chats going. So Emma, can I lead it to you for maybe some first questions? I don't know if those are all questions or not. You're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference between an internal strategy recruiting process and a consulting recruiting process?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think the way I put it is you usually want to have parallel plans. And many folks look at internal strategy and consulting as quite interrelated, and they happen very similarly. So what that is, preparing your documents over the summer, as Kaylin mentioned, would be really smart. You will use the fall to attend info sessions, find out more information, meet people, and late October through early December is usually when, that's a big window, but you'll see what I mean, is usually when firms and internal strategy roles open to apply to, with deadlines hitting late November through mid-December. And the interviews, consulting firm interviews, have really been pushed up. So that first week of January, we had a lot of consulting interviews, with the internal strategy interviews sometimes moving into late January, February, even March. So what that means is you can go through both, which is great, and see how things land. If you early in January end up getting the ideal role that you really wanted, then you can appropriately opt out of further interviews. CMC can help you navigate that. And then if you go through some early January that don't work out, it means you've still put into place further opportunities that will be available to you later throughout Mod 3 and even into Mod 4. Another example of this is folks do LDP recruiting and or corporate finance, for example. And I save those two because LDP is sort of like a strategy position, because you're coming into a company and looking at various roles within the company, finance, strategy, marketing, to then ultimately, after a 2 to 3 year program, be spit out at a very senior level. And you've seen so much of the company that those roles are looked at VPs who come in and work on strategy or work on something that is more holistic to the company because you've been an MBA who's gone through their leadership development program. Corporate finance and LDP applications follow a similar timeline to what I just mentioned. So again, you can do those in parallel to a consulting prep and application, and the casing that you do will be helpful in all of those interviews. I will plug that again. The prep that you're doing is really, really helpful. It's also just how to think through business problems, which is most likely why you all are coming back to get an MBA. And so I think a lot of people think it's interesting. It's Sunday nights, I understand, but it's folks working on problems and solving problems that are hopefully interesting. And also it will mirror what your summer looks like. So you're pulling these muscles and getting ready for what ultimately your role will be. Long answer to hopefully answer that question.
Thank you. Courtney, could you talk a little bit about consulting recruiting for international students and how the process may be different or similar?
Absolutely. Great question. So international students will go through the same process. I think the thing to keep in mind is many firms try to be upfront about sponsorship. So what that means is there are certain firms who can no longer sponsor or choose to no longer sponsor. And it is my suggestion that you don't spend too much time engaging with them. We certainly have alum at those firms that perhaps you resonate with and want to utilize as mentors. However, that's not going to be fruitful for actually receiving an internship because their influence is within that firm that doesn't sponsor. but we have many firms who still do sponsor, such as LEK. Most of the MBBs still sponsor, and there's a myriad of firms that still sponsor. It can be a frustrating process, and so you do want to navigate visa jobs and look who has historically sponsored. We also have a trend of over the last 5 years. We have data within 1220. And we've pulled that Excel for you all to have. It's within the incoming MBA 2026 folder of resources. And then in tandem to doing consulting recruiting, I would tell you to look at tech or to look at corporate finance or to look at marketing, whatever you think would be most interesting, because there will be firms and companies within those areas that will sponsor. So it's certainly something to keep in mind. It will be up to you to really filter and look into the back end of if they do sponsor. And I think that historic information is the most useful to use. It's not always publicized on a website that a company does or does not sponsor. So perhaps it'll be listed within 1220 in the job posting if it's tagged appropriately. And it would be tagged if they've been honest with us and clear with us that they sponsor or don't. Otherwise, we can look at historic data and see what we think.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would also just say, we can help you navigate that and help you nail down an answer if something is unclear, because you will see as you look online and you look at resources that are outside of Owen and outside of the CMC, there are websites like, do these companies sponsor? And you can get some really unclear answers. And the long of the short of it is some places will sponsor in certain departments or in certain offices, or on certain teams. Some will have sponsored candidates last year, and now this year they don't. And things can change really quickly, unfortunately. And so we can help you track down an answer. We would rather have some difficult conversations and questions than you fall in love with a place and someone fall in love with you, and then that can't work. So we're always happy to help you figure things out. I think that may be all for questions now. There was a question about tonight's management consulting session. Is that going to be recorded, Courtney, or no?
That cannot be recorded.
It's with an outside partner, so we can't record it, unfortunately.
Okay. We have a couple more minutes. I'd love to let the second years go by 45, just because I know y'all are in real life right now. But we have a few minutes with them. Does anyone have a question you want to unmute yourself and ask or put in the chat? No pressure.
Hi, Courtney. I would like to ask. Hi, thank you so much for the information session. Just a quick question, for those of us who are starting a pre-MBA program coming this week or the next, and absolutely have no idea about what the process is like and what to expect. Is there like a standard do or don't kind of thing? Especially because like some of them are also like scheduling you for coffee chats. So what should you talk about? What should you not? If you could like just shed light on that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I can't recall, Monica and Kaylin, if you did anyone, but I'll overview. So these sessions over the summer are meant to be informational, and then also for you all to start building a network and get into their systems. So many of them will have programs where they'll do 1 to 3 hour sessions and go over, what's the work that we do in X firm. And additionally, they'll set up these coffee chats to really get to know you. I think to be prepared to come in with why MBA, which means why MBA now? What are you studying? What have you done prior to this that has led you to this? And then why consulting or why strategy? And don't think that your answers need to be perfect, but they really are genuinely asking you because those are questions they would want to know within an interview later on. So just sort of think about, okay, it's actually for 2 reasons, X and Y, and go through that. And those are most likely what they're asking for in the coffee chats. It is rare that they will ask you to go through a case interview at this point in time. We do have some conferences over the summer, Forte in particular. And so female candidates who attend may be pulled into interviews. Usually the case interviews will be pushed to like August. And so you can work with me to get some prep before then. But if you have a coffee chat set up with Bain, for example, I think it's nothing but exciting. So just get ready to talk about yourself in a succinct way, be able to tell them why are we interfacing today. Monica and Kaylin, would you have anything to add?
I think that's perfect. I didn't go to a pre-MBA session, but from what I heard, having your story down. So I would just take exactly what Courtney said, those questions, spend a few minutes reflecting on them, and make sure you know that. So when someone asks you, you can tell them why you're there and be excited about it because they're really excited to meet you.
Anyone
Thank
else? Yeah, of course. I will add to that. So we do have resume reviews with coaches over the summer. You can also sign up with career exploration sessions with us. We could do a mock interview if you really want to prep for a coffee chat that's a couple weeks out. I'm always happy to do that. There's some different areas of that you can tag when you sign up for a session with us. So please, if that's within your schedule to do, feel free to do so. Take advantage of any meetings that you can find with us. So I don't want to cut anyone off, but I also want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I'll just thank you all for coming. A special shout out to Monica and Kaylin. I'm just so thankful to have you all on leadership and engaged, especially over the summer. So you all get excited. You have some great second years on your hand. So I will say thank you and officially sign off. And if y'all have questions, I'll stay on for a few minutes. So if you have extra time, feel free to shoot me questions. But otherwise, have a good afternoon.